Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. We are Covenant Technology Partners, and we will be presenting on case management and content packs for Dynamics 365. Today's presenters are going to be Corey Van Dyke and Pierre Laframboise. From Covenant, Corey is the practice lead for our CTP247 managed services practice, and Pierre works with our data analytics team. I'm going to go ahead and let them take it from here.
All right. Looks like I can share my screen. My name is Corey Van Dyke, and as Olivia said, I am the practice lead for our managed services practice that we have branded as CTP247 at Covenant. What I am going to show you initially is just a very high-level brief out-of-the-box day in the life of what you see with customer service management, and then I'll turn that over to Pierre to show you some more fun stuff in Power BI, which is what I'm sure everybody's here for. So we have a demo environment, and there's not as much content as we would like to have in here, but this demo environment, it gave us some initial content to work with. Generally, when you log into Dynamics 365 out of the box before you make any customizations, you're dropped at the sales activity dashboard, or one of these out-of-the-box dashboards here, which we'll come back to. But from a customer service standpoint, I generally, can everybody see my screen first of all? Looks like we can, okay. So generally, I will come in and I will go to the service section, and I will come into cases. By default, you're at my active cases, but for the sake of what we're doing here, I will go to all cases, and I will see the list of all the cases that are in this demo. Inside here, we'll look at a couple things. I'll open up a case. In here, you have the case detail tile. Recent cases, some descriptions, and these things can all be customized from a look and feel standpoint. I know one of the things that we've done or we're working on is, we're making the description box bigger because that's quite small to add a lot of detail into. But whenever you create a new case or you work within this case, you can add your detail in here. I'm not very good at my sample descriptions. And then you always have to, in the bottom right, click on the little disk icon here to save. It does auto-save, but I just got in the habit of clicking on that to make sure my data is saved. But through here, I can assign the case to another resource. So this one here is currently assigned to me, for instance. I'm going to give it to Pierre here. And then if you have your workflows set up, which we're not going to dive into today, email notifications can be sent out letting them know that a case has been assigned to them. In our case, the client also will get a notification letting them know who the engineer that's been assigned is. And we've added some custom fields in here as well in our environment. But then you'll see that status is still in progress. When it's time, this case is in progress. So as I work through this, when it's time to resolve the case, out of the box you have an issue, or you have a setup like this. So information provided or problem solved. You can put in your resolution.
Hi. I called into the meeting before, but I wasn't getting any audio. I can hear you now.
Okay.
I've been watching what you've been doing.
If you have, if you have this hooked up to any kind of a billing system, or in our case, I track how many hours a case is taken, so you can put in the hours and additional remarks.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So in the capacity that we utilize it is, we use it for our funeral homes that we coordinate our sales through, and then our procurement as well. So I'm not necessarily sure of that.
Going on.
Sorry about that.
Okay. And then you can resolve the issue, and then you can, and then the issue shows up as resolved. So back at the case list here, out of the box, you can sort everything by active cases versus resolved cases or canceled cases, priority, where it came in from. So so in our case, we have a client portal, and you can log in as a client, and you can enter your case, and those would always come in as web. But in this case, if you're an agent working behind a desk or I take a phone call from somebody and I'm going to open a case for a client, I can open a brand new case. And from that standpoint, I can mark the origin. I would probably want to mark, email or phone, that kind of thing. And these are completely customizable. We've removed Facebook and Twitter because we don't receive cases from those social networks, but you can add those in here. You could add posts, and those posts get shown back on the customer or the client portal, as well as send emails out of here, attach things to different knowledge base articles. So there's many things you can do inside here, but the other important thing is from an account perspective, if you have account managers, if you look at the actual individual accounts, so we'll go to Fourth Coffee here. And we do the same thing internally. As an account manager, anybody looking at that account, I can see all the recent cases that were opened up. So that's kind of high level from that standpoint. But then on the report side of the house, out of the box, you get a few things. So I have a customer services representative dashboard out of the box here. I've made 0 customizations. But there's really very little, everything here is static, right? So I could see active cases. I could drill down a little bit out of the box, and I can get a little bit more data. But as you see, none of the other tiles change or anything like that. So there's really not a lot here to drill down on. And you get a few other, dashboards out of the box. And I can make my own dashboard. I can create new or add new tiles on here if I want to track the SLAs and things like that. But what's exciting, and what I'm going to turn this over to Pierre on, is a little bit more power you get, not just with customer service dashboards, but with any kind of dashboard that you can use Power BI to access the data. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that over to him and let him go into more detail a little bit on what's related to customer service as well as Power BI as a whole.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. As Corey was saying, my name is Pierre Laframboise, and I'm a Director of Business Analytics at Covenant. So I'm going to cover some kind of a high-level overview of what Power BI is. Then I'm planning on kind of going into what some of the reasons would be why you'd want to use Power BI with Dynamics. And specifically, we're going to be talking about the case management portion of it. Then I'm going to go into a demonstration of how to access some of the dashboards that are provided out of the box for Power BI's integration with Dynamics. And we'll talk about some kind of future state as well and what it takes to maybe create custom dashboards and visualizations for your Dynamics environment. So at a high level, Power BI is part of what Microsoft is terming their Power Platform. That consists of a few different applications, Power BI being one of them, Power Apps, which is for creating line of business applications with little to no code, and also Microsoft Flow, which is a workflow engine that kind of ties the two together. It is a cloud-based analytics platform primarily. There are some on-premises components to it, and there are some other additional components beyond just the analytics, but from a primary perspective, it is an analytics platform as a service. It provides a few sets of functionality that are important to what we're discussing today in terms of this kind of reporting and dashboard. First, it provides self-service enablement. What I will be showing you in terms of connecting Power BI to Dynamics is something that any user that has access to your Dynamics environment is capable of doing. It's a self-service driven paradigm. You don't necessarily need to be a developer. You don't have to code for any of this. It just connects and it works. It's also a data visualization platform. There's a wide variety of visualizations available, but it essentially provides reports and dashboards on top of data sets. In addition to that visualization, that was the data discovery tool, and it's an interactive data discovery tool, and this is where you'll start to see some of the larger differences between the dashboards and reporting capabilities that are available out of the box in Dynamics versus Power BI, is this ability to kind of interact with this data. But perhaps the most important part is this data extraction and enrichment. Power BI isn't just a data visualization engine and just an analytics engine. It also contains components that allow you to connect to a number of different data services, whether it's a database, whether it's a flat file, whether it's a cloud-based service. It has the ability to extract that data, connect to it, and enrich it, and kind of create mashups across it. And that's one of the things that we'll talk about a little later in this presentation. From a parts perspective, the things that we're going to be talking about today are three things. We're going to be talking about data sets. In this case, it's a data set that is sourced from the customer service module of Dynamics. We're going to talk about reports, and then ultimately we're going to talk about dashboards, and we'll kind of go into what the difference is between those. So why use Power BI with D365? I already hinted on some of these, but to start with, we have some out-of-the-box analytic apps that can be used. These used to be called content packs from Microsoft. They've recently been renamed. They're called apps now. They're part of the app source, and we'll get to how we get to them and how they're used. But it's just a terminology change. So when you hear me talk about analytic apps, it's essentially the same thing as a content pack. Power BI offers a greater level of interactivity for the reports. What Corey was kind of showing off there as well, you do have some drill capabilities, and we can kind of click through and get to some of the underlying data inside of Dynamics. There's a lot of limitations there in terms of how you interact with that data. We have a lot wider range of interactive capabilities inside of Power BI. Power BI also offers some advanced insights. I'll show you that from a set of tools that are built into Power BI called Quick Insights, but there are others as well that can be used inside of Power BI with various data sources. And Power BI also will integrate into more advanced analytic tools such as Azure Machine Learning and some of the different Azure cognitive services for providing AI and advanced kind of analytics as part of your environment. There's a much, much wider range of visualizations. The visualization engine for Power BI is actually open source. It's based on a set of open source libraries called D3.js. It's data-driven documents JavaScript library. It is fully open source. So if you can't find a visualization available out of the box for Power BI, chances are you can build it or find someone to build it for you. So it's very, very wide open in that sort of sense of being able to visualize this data for report consumption. Again, that is not the same from a Dynamics perspective. You're very limited into kind of classic chart types, like maybe pie charts and bar charts and that sort of thing. And anything that kind of goes beyond that is beyond those capabilities, and so that's where you rely on a tool like Power BI. And then the last one, again, I hinted on earlier, is this data extensibility. So what you're going to find in most organizations is while they may have the case information residing within Dynamics, there may be other additional data that they want to augment that with. Maybe it's data provided by third parties. Maybe it's data provided by monitoring systems within your organization. Let's say that you are collecting statistical information around your IT ecosystem, right? Things like uptimes of servers and maybe patch status and all of those type of things. Well, how can we correlate that with maybe an uptick in cases in our servicing system? Well, Power BI allows you to kind of bridge those gaps between there. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, kind of show some examples of that as well. So as I mentioned, the new name for these content packs is apps. So these are analytic apps. There's a number of them available for Dynamics. I think there's around 24 or 25 of these various applications that are available out of the box for Dynamics. For Dynamics 365 specifically, there's 5 out-of-the-box applications that include sales, customer service, their social actions. Those type of things have apps written around it. Business Central has 10 different ones, AX has 3, and Nav has 6. But there's a pretty wide variety of these pre-developed dashboards, reports, and data sets that you can use right out of the box with your implementation. So one of the questions we do get fairly frequently around Power BI, especially when utilizing it with something like Dynamics, is how is this licensed? There are 2 primary ways that Power BI is licensed. There's a basic license, which is a free license, and it offers a pretty wide scope of functionality within the Power BI ecosystem. Most things that you can do with a pay-for license, you can also do with a free license, with one very big caveat, and that is all of the distribution and collaboration stuff. If you want to develop a report and share it with your colleagues, you are going to need to have a professional license to do that. If you want to create custom applications around your Dynamics environment and you want to distribute that to your enterprise, that will also require a professional license to be able to do that sort of functionality. However, everything that we are showing today in the demo that's coming up is being done with a free license. So all of this is functionality that is capable under that standard free license. And from a costing perspective, the monthly cost for a pro license is somewhere right around $9.99. It'll vary depending on what kind of a Microsoft agreement you have, but that is the retail pricing for it. So we'll go into a quick demo of Power BI, and we're also going to go into the demo of installing the app that we talked about. So here I'm inside the Power BI portal. And I actually have a dashboard up here, which is an IT operations dashboard. And it shows a variety of different metrics that the organization is tracking. Everything from network usage by region to the patch compliance on my servers. This is just an example from a visualization perspective of some of the things that are capable inside of Power BI. All of this is drillable. I can hover over things. I can get access to the underlying data. If I click through on one of these visualizations on my dashboard, it will drill down to the underlying report, or in this case, this is a Q&A feature, which is one of the advanced insights that I had mentioned, where you can actually ask questions of your data set in plain language without needing to know syntax such as like a SQL or other program-based syntaxes, and actually ask questions of your data. So if I click through again on one of these visualizations, it'll load the underlying report. And these underlying reports are based on a data set. So these are the 3 kind of components that I was talking about. Is your upper level is your dashboard. And your dashboard is an at-glance view of whatever world you're trying to display here. And in this case, it's this IT operations, right? So I have this high-level dashboard that's giving me my status on all of the different KPIs that I want to be able to track. Now, a dashboard can be sourced from many different data sources. That data could be coming from databases, could be coming from flat files, could be coming from online services. It can come from a number of places. But ultimately, where it's pulling data from is a report. So underneath from a Power BI perspective, underneath every dashboard is a series of reports. So as I drilled through on that dashboard, it brought me to my underlying IT operations report. In here, I have full interactivity. I can click on any of these elements. So if I click on Canada, for instance, the rest of the report will be filtered accordingly based on the utilization and so forth in those areas. I can do similar hovering and that sort of thing. Now, from a report perspective, a report can only ever be tied to a single data set. And that data set is where we're actually going to pull data from our various services like Dynamics. Now, a data set can consist of multiple data sources. Don't need to confuse it too much, but I just want to explain that there's a hierarchy here of how this kind of data flows. So the first thing we're really doing is fetching the data from whatever system that it resides in. We then build some reports on top of it. And then based on those reports, we can do custom dashboards that then match whatever sort of visualizations and metrics that we want to actually track. I'm going to hop over into our demo environment for our Dynamics. So right now, this is a blank slate. Nothing's been set up here from a Power BI perspective. So if you were using Power BI for the first time, this is what it would look like when you log in. You're going to get a little welcome screen here, and it's going to ask you to discover some content. So from a Dynamics perspective, since this is a cloud service, we're going to go to, we want to discover content in our cloud services. So I go to this Git, and this is going to launch Microsoft's App Source. So within App Source, we have dozens of different online services that we can connect to. Some of these are Microsoft services. Some of them are third-party services like Adobe, MailChimp, Google. You name it, there's services for it. There's a lot of these various services available. We do a quick filter here to find Dynamics. The one that we're talking about here specifically today is this customer services module for Dynamics 365. So we're going to grab that we want to grab this analytic application for our environment. So we'll go to Get It Now. It's going to load the application here. This may take a moment. So what it's asking for to be able to load this is it wants the URL that corresponds to our Dynamics CRM Online environment. So I have that here. So in our case, it's Customer Service Content Pack. We just type this in. We click on Next. It's going to check to see whether the credentials I'm logged in with at the moment actually match with the credentials that are in CRM for a single sign-on experience. And in my case, it does. And so it automatically loads it. So it's installing the application right now. And I'll just give a really quick kind of overview of this interface. Over here on our panel on the left is kind of our menu for navigating within the Power BI portal. And we have a few different items up here. So we have favorites, we have recent, we have apps, we have reports and dashboards that have been shared with me from other colleagues. And then we have this concept around kind of workspaces. And workspaces are kind of private work areas. Those can be collaborative, where I will work with other team members. So I may have a team workspace. Or there's a personal workspace that every user will have as well that they can use for building out their own personal reports and dashboards or views around these kind of data sets. But that goes a little bit beyond the scope of what we're talking about today, because what we're talking about specifically is apps. So I have this Customer Service Analytics app now loaded into my environment. You can see the date in which it was loaded. It's today. Who was provided by it? It's a Microsoft provided one. I can favorite it if I want it to show up under my favorites list. I can also delete it if I'm no longer interested. But the important thing to understand here is this is mine. This doesn't belong to anyone else in the organization at this point. This is my personal installed app for accessing analytics in the Dynamics environment. So if you had other users that want to use this, they would need to install these applications themselves. There is also an enterprise deployment plan if you wanted to push this out to a number of users. But the point is this is my personal app space. So any apps that I subscribe to will show up here as I add them. So if I click through to it, it's going to load the dashboard, and it refreshes the data live from CRM, from the Dynamics 365, and it's showing me the high-level dashboard of all of my incidents or my cases, and it gives me some metrics around it. As Corey was explaining earlier, this is a demo environment. We only have a handful of cases loaded in here. There's 28 cases. A few of them have been closed out and so forth. And so this isn't necessarily the most exciting dashboard to look at from a demonstration perspective, because we don't have an ongoing kind of support role occurring in our demo environment. But this would give you, usually from a management perspective, that kind of high-level insight as to how your service organization is performing. So it gives you information around how many cases are open, how many have opened in the last week, and so on. But this is a pre-designed dashboard. You don't really have the ability to customize this to any great extent, because this is what is provided out of the box by the app experience. And there may be functionality on this dashboard that you aren't using within your organization. Maybe your organization is not international, and so your cases are always going to show up in the U.S. as an example, or something like that. So maybe this map isn't as important to you. So you don't have full flexibility at this point, because this is a curated experience for you. But everything on here is drillable. So if I want to look at my actual cases, I can click on this tile and drill through to the underlying report. So here is the underlying report that actually represents my customer service activity. We have a few different charts here. All of them, again, are interactive. So if I want to just look at case resolution here, I can click on that, and the other charts will be modified based on that. I also have a number of pages associated with this report. This is a tabbed report. So I have, if I go over here to the first one, I have active cases in my organization. So again, this report is filterable as well. So say I just want to look at cases that are assigned to me. So I can click over here on my name. The report will filter accordingly to show me just cases that are assigned to me. So I have 4 cases assigned to me. I have 2 normal cases, 1 high case, 1 low priority case. I can actually see what the cases are. I can see who the customer is that's submitting the case, get a little bit of information on it. If I back out here and kind of look at all of the cases, I also have the ability to, say, I want to look at it just based on priority. So I have 7 high priority cases. Click on that. My case in a warning state is now limited down to the 7. So I can drill into them as well and kind of look at them. So all of this kind of interactive capability is provided, again, out of the box from this content pack or application experience, but it is curated. So you'll notice, if you're at all familiar with Power BI, that I have certain things here, like my ability to pin this to custom dashboards, is disabled, and they'll tell me because it's read-only content. And that is ultimately what an application is from this perspective, is that curated read-only version of whatever data set that I'm looking at. So again, I have limited capabilities of being able to do that from the application perspective, but from an out-of-the-box experience, this provides more functionality than what you would typically have in your Dynamics environment. So just to kind of show what some of the other content is here in terms of the case management, this is that active cases in the organization report. Here we have an organization performance KPIs. This will show you information around just how quickly your organization is handling case resolution and so forth, and give you some information around there, what percentage of your reports are being escalated, so on. We have organization performance trends. This is kind of similar information, but it's showing it based on kind of our case statuses. We're kind of getting the overall trend of what is happening in terms of what are we meeting SLAs, that sort of information. Our customer service attributes we already looked at. It's just a high-level count around what is currently active in our environment. Our agent leaderboard is definitely something that may be interesting from a management perspective. It shows kind of the individual performance for our our support agents. So you can see who is your kind of top owners in terms of active cases. You can also assign inside of CRM some SLA requirements around these, and then you can get some information about how quickly these things are being closed or resolved, and whether your teammates are actually meeting their SLA requirements. Our environment doesn't really have any of the SLA stuff set up from a demo perspective, so this chart is blank. However, if you did apply that into your environment, you'd get that sort of information around who is your top performers and so forth. There's also information in here for this last report around your knowledge base and your knowledge management. Again, from our demo environment, we have very little information inside of our knowledge base. We have 2 articles that are both in a draft status. But if these were published out as actual knowledge base articles, you can get information in here about what are your most frequently used, how frequently are people hitting it, that sort of thing. Expirations around these articles that need review, a lot of different information about managing your actual support knowledge base. And so it provides you some high-level information on how all of this is managed. Just from an interface perspective, if we look up here at the top, I kind of have breadcrumbs that are laid out for me. So I'm at the report level right now. But if I want to go back up to the dashboard, I can do that by clicking through here. And now I'm back up at the top at the dashboard level. So that is the out-of-the-box experience, and that is the curated experience that Microsoft provides for this customer service module. Remember that there is a number of other modules that are available for the CRM and other Dynamics environment there, whether it's sales reporting or even like some of the marketing side of it and so forth as well. So those are a different set of curated reports, but they are also available. But you do have the ability to create custom reports against your Dynamics environment using Power BI as well. So Power BI's primary authoring tool is called Power BI Desktop. And I'll hop into that in a second because you have the ability to connect directly to your Dynamics data set through the Power BI Desktop. You can then build out custom data sets. Let's say that for some reason you wanted to show case management information along with sales, or maybe correlated to those accounts' overall sales. Doing that would require you to build a custom data set where you're spanning across those different entities within your Dynamics environment. It also, this process by using the Power BI Desktop allows you to extend your Dynamics data with additional data sources. This is where I was explaining where you could bring in third-party data. Or maybe it's not even third-party data. It's data within your organization, but it's just data that lives outside of your Dynamics environment. Maybe it's information from a marketing system. Maybe it's information from some sort of lead generation, or who knows, something that's outside of your individual Dynamics environment where you'd want to integrate this. It could be other advanced sources too. Maybe you are doing some customer segmentation using Azure Machine Learning, where you're trying to get an understanding of who your best customers are and so forth, and you want to integrate that in from a reporting perspective. All of that is possible by extending that data through the Power BI Desktop connection. The big issue with this compared to what we have just looked at is this does require knowledge of the Dynamics data model, the underlying data structures. This is still self-service, and an end user that has access to Dynamics is able to write these reports if they have the knowledge to be able to do it, but it's a much more advanced exercise than just grabbing an app out of App Source and installing it in my environment. So we're going to go through kind of just a quick demo of how we would connect to that. First thing I'm grabbing here is just the URL to our API for Dynamics. And now I've launched Power BI Desktop. So This is what you see by default when you launch Power BI Desktop. And from a licensing perspective, Power BI Desktop is free. You can download it. It doesn't cost anything to use or anything like that. It's available to any user that wants to be able to author reports. But this is what you see. You have a little splash screen that asks you what you would like to do. In my case, I would like to get data. So I'm going to the Get Data, and this is going to launch a window with all of the available data sources. As I mentioned, there are dozens of different data sources that are available from a Power BI connection perspective. Many of them are native, where it's specific to that tool. For instance, if I wanted to connect to Zendesk, there's a connector specifically for Zendesk. However, there's a number of generic connectors in here as well, everything from ODBC connectors to OData to just standard web scraping capabilities. You know, say I had a table on a website that I wanted to utilize. Maybe I wanted to grab something from like the U.S. Census Bureau or something like that. I can do that through here from some of these generic sources. In our case, though, we are looking at an online service, and we are looking for Dynamics 365 Online. So that's what I'm selecting as my online service. I'm going to click Connect. It's going to ask me for some information. This is the URL that I had just copied. There are some advanced features here that we won't necessarily go into, but this allows us to kind of parameterize our connection. For our purposes, though, we are just connecting straight into the data repository for Dynamics. So right now, it's going out and it's connecting live to our Dynamics environment, and it's interrogating the data structure, so the data model that's there. And this is then where, like I said, it gets complicated fairly quickly. So this is where you would be needing some sort of understanding of what is stored in all of these tables. Dynamics consists of, again, dozens of different tables. And you have to understand not just how, what contains what data, but you also need to understand how they relate to each other if you want to kind of span across them. And so, again, this is where it does get a little more complicated. So in our case, though, I'm just going to grab an accounts table here. It's going out, and again, it's hitting this data live. It's giving me a quick preview of what sort of data is available to me inside of my accounts table. And I have a few options here. I can just load this table raw, take everything that's in there, or I can go in here and I can actually edit the information that I'm looking for. This is that kind of data mashup and data enhancement capability that I was mentioning earlier. So in our Dynamics environment for account, I have a lot of fields here that don't have any data and are not important to me. So that's actually what I'm going to do here for this cleanup. I'm just going to say I want to eliminate some of these columns. I don't want everything. So I'm going to choose columns. Getting rid of this, I'm going to organize this alphabetically so that I can see what I'm looking for. And I'm going to pick just a handful of attributes from this table that I'm interested in. So I am interested in some address information. So I'm going to grab my address. Address line 1, 2, 3. Get my postal code. My state province I'm going to grab as well. And then I'm going to scroll mostly to the bottom, and I'm going to grab my account name. And I'm also going to grab the website for the accounts, the URL that they have registered in our environment. I'm going to click OK. So now it's filtering that data down to just a handful of columns. And so instead of having 50 columns here for attributes, I just now have a small handful that allows me to do this. I do have some additional capabilities here. Let's say I wanted to give these a little more friendly names instead of having these underscores and so forth. I can come in here and I can rename them, and I can clean this up in a manner that would be more friendly for my end users. But for this demonstration, I'm just going to grab this data quickly. So I'm going to say close and apply. So what it's doing now is it's actually going out and querying the Dynamics system for me, and it's pulling all of the account records that are associated with that data set that I just created. And it's brought it over. So now I have my accounts table. I have all of the information here that I need for it. So if I drag name over here, I'm going to get a list of the names of the accounts that I have available, and I can continue to kind of augment this. I can throw the website URL in here. I can take some of those addresses and I could map them out, do various things. But this is the start of how you would create a custom report for Dynamics. The connecting to it, the getting access to the information is all very easy. The part that's kind of missing is the knowledge of what is stored where and how it's stored. So that kind of brings me then to the next part of our presentation here. And that's what is coming from a Dynamics and Power Platform perspective. A few months ago, Microsoft had announced this concept that they have around the common data service. And there's two common data services. There's common data service for applications and a common data service for analytics. And this is a layer that sits on top of their cloud environment, their Dynamics 365 cloud environment specifically, that allows you to integrate your applications directly into your Dynamics environment through this common data service. What also, though, allows, the other big enhancement, I guess, here is the common data model. So Dynamics 365 and many of their other tools are also moving over to this concept where they have a common open source data model for storing this data. And this then allows tool vendors, even with Microsoft internally, with things like Power BI, to create purpose-built connectors for these services. And it allows you to even extend these services with your own attributes, your own entities, and so forth, and have something like Power BI be able to natively interrogate that and understand what that structure is. So you wouldn't have to necessarily understand where everything lives inside of Dynamics any longer to create a Power BI report. And this is also true of the different Power services like Power Apps. So you could create a data entry form using Power Apps that automatically pushed data into your accounts entity for Dynamics. So it would show right up inside of CRM. And all of this is things that are coming or are already in place but are continuing to be enhanced. So at the Data Summit, the Business Applications Summit, a few weeks ago, Microsoft released the roadmap for when these things are coming. And there's a very large release coming for Dynamics and the Power Platform in October that's going to make most of these services available. So from the Business Applications Platform, everything is now moving through this kind of a common data services layer. Again, the analytics is moving through here, the applications are moving through here, and this allows you to tie in all of these previously disconnected services. So I can take something like Office 365 and directly integrate it in there with my Dynamics 365. But I can also take line of business applications that I'm developing internally and do that same thing. I can integrate other platforms that are outside of Microsoft's ecosystem. Maybe I want to get some better sentiment analysis, so I'm pulling in Facebook and Twitter and that sort of content. All of that can flow through this common data service, and then these overarching services like Power Apps and Power BI, they understand that structure and then are able to report on that information directly. So that's the big change that is coming. So when it comes to being able to create these custom reports and dashboards in the future, it's going to get easier, not necessarily harder from that perspective, because Power BI will be able to natively understand what that data model of Dynamics looks like. So we have a few resources if you're interested in learning some more about this. To start off with, to understand the Power Platform integration with Dynamics, we only talked about Power BI here, and it was at a very high level, but if you want to learn more about Power Apps, learn more about Microsoft Flow, and even more about Power BI, I suggest you visit this link. It's Dynamics Microsoft.com, and then it's on the Power Platform information. And there's some white papers and some documentation and so forth that kind of talks about not only what is coming, but what is available right now today. From a Power BI external services perspective, this document that I have linked here will give you information on how to connect to all of those different services that I showed you, whether it's other dynamic services or whether it's other third-party services that you want to connect to. This gives you information on how that works, how you can manage it from an organization perspective, and so forth. And then the last recommendation I have here is to kind of look at the Microsoft Business Application Summit sessions. All of the sessions from that conference have been published online. They're available at this link. You can watch the videos. At least I would recommend watching the keynote, because the keynote does a very good job of kind of describing what this overall ecosystem looks like, and it will be looking like in the next few months as these various services are rolled out. And that is it. Do you guys have any questions or anything I can cover for you?
Yeah, I had a question.
Go ahead.
So we currently utilize 365 in Azure as a separate server with a separate database, or CRM rather, with 365, and we're definitely interested about migrating to 365, but we're a little hesitant just because it's so new. So we just weren't sure, exactly. You guys said that not release. Like, would you? Obviously, you wouldn't state that it's unstable, but would you see any pitfalls for people that are migrating to the cloud in a production space that we would have anything that we would have to worry about in that respect?
Not from a pure just Dynamics platform. Most of the stuff that I was talking about that's coming is along the integration side with these other tools, such as Azure, and integrating with some of the other Office products, and integrating with Power BI and so forth. The Dynamics 365 environment itself is pretty mature and solid in terms of doing a migration from either an on-prem or a hosted environment into it. So I wouldn't necessarily be hesitant of that. Now, there may be some things that will require some custom migration and so forth as you decide to move through that, and we'd be more than happy to discuss that with you in more details if you're interested, and kind of get what the pitfalls are. But again, just from a CRM platform perspective, I wouldn't have any hesitation at all to recommend moving over. Again, the coming soon stuff is almost entirely around the greater ecosystem, not just Dynamics, but how Dynamics plugs into everything else.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Also, I wanted to add, we are having a Dynamics 365 Summit next, I believe it's next Thursday, the 13th. And Olia just posted in the chat window the invite if anybody in the St. Louis area is interested. We're going to go into a lot more detail in a lot of different areas around Dynamics. Anybody else have any additional questions?
Yes. We currently are actually running full Office 365 in our environment, but we're trying to get more in depth with Power BI, but we're not sure exactly kind of where to go and how to actually utilize it in terms of an analytics, in terms of how to enhance already our analytics usage. So we just I know we just kind of have more questions about that, though, with there being more training just with an overall overview with Power BI.
We offer an actual training program. It's part of our data visualization jumpstart, and what it consists of is a full day of training around the development side of Power BI. It has a full day of around the management and administration from an IT perspective of how you roll it out, how you govern it, and so forth. And then there's a few extra days on there from a mentoring perspective as we kind of walk through like a proof of concept to get you guys up to speed on it. But so it's a bit of a combination of direct, like classroom-based training, along with some advisory services to help you kind of plan it out for your custom scenario, what your environment would look like. If you'd like to learn more about that, we certainly can share that. But we also do regular webinars around Power BI and so forth. But they tend to be, again, an hour-long session, kind of like this, where it's going to be relatively high level. If you want more of a deep dive, I would suggest you look into some of the more in-depth training that we offer.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before we wrap this up? All right, Olia, do you want to wrap this up, or do you want me to go ahead?
I think we're good. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you for your time, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I'm going to go ahead.